Hi there, and welcome back to Excel Weekend. My name is Steve Kraynak, and I'm going to be talking to you about customizing Excel. And we're going to be talking about startup templates, cell styles, and many more things. So I'm happy you're with me. A little bit about myself. Again, my name is Steve Kraynak. I'm a director at SumProduct US, and you can find us at sumproduct.com. I'm also an MVP, so I was awarded the Microsoft MVP last year for M365, focusing on Excel. I've also worked for 12 years as a product manager on the Microsoft Excel team at Microsoft, and I got to work on a lot of really cool features. Some of those are listed there, like the text join function, the ifs function. I got to work on Excel for Mac and Excel for the iPad. I worked on some really cool ease of use features, such as the ability to unhide multiple sheets. Hopefully you're familiar with that one. And I also worked on accessibility initiatives and also worked on STEM education initiatives at Microsoft. Prior to that, I also have 10 years in the vaccine manufacturing industry, and I'm a father of 4 kids, including triplets. So the objectives for today are to teach you a lot of things about how you can customize Excel, and it's all about making you more productive and more efficient. So some of that will be learning how to use templates. So you can start with a new document template, using some of Excel's default settings that you may not be aware of, using cell styles to really help you get going faster, formatting your spreadsheet. We'll talk about pivot table defaults, chart templates, and taking advantage of the Personal Macro Workbook and a bunch of other things. So again, I'm happy you're here, and let's get right to it. First, I want to start by talking about some basic easy settings that you can do in Excel. And this is things like changing the font size. So here, I'm just going to open a blank workbook, and this is like the default settings. And for maybe I want to use a different font size. So it starts out with 11. There's also the font size in the formula bar. It gives us 3 sheets, and maybe I just want one. And then also, I usually like to turn off grid lines in my spreadsheet, so I'll turn off grid lines. So this is kind of like a good starting point for me, although again, I only want one sheet. So easy thing you can do is go into the Excel options. You can change the default font size. So here I'll just change it to 9, and I'm just going to change to use only one sheet because I can always create a new sheet when I need to. And then it tells us to restart Excel to use our new settings. And then when I'll close that workbook, I don't save it. And then when I relaunch Excel, let's just see what happens with a blank workbook. So here you can see there is the font size is 9. There's only one sheet. However, it does leave the grid lines turned on, which I don't like. To go beyond the basic settings, you can start by using a custom workbook as your template. And to do that, there's a special folder that you're going to save this file into. It's if you go into Windows Explorer and type %appdata%, and then go into Microsoft Excel and Excel Start, you can save a file in there called book.xltx or book.xltm if you need macros, and then that file will be used by Excel whenever you create a new workbook. If both of those files exist, then Excel will choose the one called book.xltx. So if you need it to be macro enabled, just make sure that you only use that one. And again, this is for when you create a new workbook. So like if you press Control N on the keyboard or go to File and New Blank Workbook, this will be used. So now let's demonstrate how that works. So this again is the folder. It's the same place where your Personal Macro Workbook will get stored. So here I have my file. It's set to font size 9, and maybe I want to set that back to 11. I could select the whole sheet and change it to 11. That would work, but really there's a better way of doing that. So I'm going to undo that. And now instead, I'm going to change the normal cell style. Now, the normal cell style is really going to give you the default font in the workbook. So I'm going to go in there, and I can change that to size 11 if I want, and then click OK. And you'll see that that increases the font size for me, and I didn't need to select the whole sheet. And then I'm going to go and turn off the grid lines, and now I can go and just type in my template here just so we can see that this is actually working. And now when you go to save it, you're going to go to Save As, and you need to choose more options, and then you can choose to save it as a template. So you want to go down the list and find Excel template, and then it will automatically go to this custom office templates folder. That's not what you want for this startup. So you can type in %app data %, and that will take you to where you need to go. And then you click on Microsoft and Excel, and then get into the Excel start folder. And again, it's important to name the file. It's book.xltx. That's the only name that will work. So you save it, and then we can, so we have this template open. You need to close it before you can test it out one time. So I'm just going to close this file, and then if I go into File New, or here I just press Control N for New Workbook, you can see that it starts up with a new file based on my template, and you can see that because cell B2 has my template in it, and the font size is 11, and the grid lines are turned off. So that's how you can save your template. Now, to do the same thing on Mac, it's similar. You set up the changes that you want and then just go to the File menu and do Save as Template. Here you can search for a folder called Startup, and then inside Startup you'll find an Excel folder, and then in there is where you want to save the file. So again, it's called book.xltx, and I can just save that file, and there I go. So now I have my template anytime I create a new workbook. So when is the new workbook template used? So that's a slight difference between Mac and Windows. So on Windows, once you set this up, if you use Control N, you'll get the new file based on the template. Or when you launch Excel, if you turn off the option to show that start screen. So if it just launches right into a workbook, then it's going to launch into your new template. When it's not used on Windows is when you go to the File menu and you click Blank Workbook, which you can see on the screen here. However, on Mac, it's kind of the same. So when you hit the keyboard shortcut Command N, which will create a new workbook, or when you launch Excel, if you have the gallery not displayed, but also on Mac, when you press the blank workbook, that is going to use the custom workbook template. And here I'll just demonstrate how to set it up so that a new workbook is launched when you launch Excel. And the way to do that is to turn off the start page. So you can go into your Excel options, choose General, and then just uncheck the Show Start Screen when application starts. Normally it's on by default, so you'll turn that off and then click OK. And then anytime you launch Excel, it's just going to launch directly to a new workbook for you. That same option you can find on Mac by going to the Excel preferences and then choose General. And there's a checkbox there called Show Workbook Gallery when opening Excel. That's the default. So when you launch Excel, it'll bring you to a page where you can see recent documents and things. If you uncheck that and then launch Excel, it'll just come right to a new workbook immediately as soon as you start Excel. Now you can also create a customized template for when you insert a new sheet. So anytime you click on that little plus sign to insert a new sheet, in this case, you're going to save the template to the same folder that we showed for the custom new document template, but this time you're going to name it sheet.xl. So here I'm going to show how we can set up a new sheet template. So if we look here, just by default, when I click on new sheet, I get the typical default sheet and it has the grid lines on, which I don't like. So I'll just take that one away. And now I'm going to change this file and just say my sheet template, just so we can see the effect of this. And then I'm going to save this in the right spot. So we go to File, Save As, and it's easy just to click More Options, and then you choose Excel Template from the drop down. And then up in the address bar, you need to type in that %app data %, and that'll take you into the special folder. Then you navigate to Microsoft and Excel, and then Excel Start. And then you just need to change the file name, so it has to be called sheet.xltx, and then go ahead and save it. And now you need to close that template the first time you use it. So I'm going to close that file out and create a new workbook here. So Control N to create a new one. And that you can see it's based on my workbook template. But then if I click the new sheet button, you'll see it's the My Sheet template. So anytime I click the new sheet button, it's just going to create new sheets based on that template. It doesn't matter how many times I do it. So that's just a nice way that you can control both things. You can have a new workbook template, and then you can also have a template for your new sheets. Now there are ways to add some more flexibility to this, because Using a brand new workbook or a new sheet template is nice, but sometimes you want the flexibility to choose another template, and you can only have one new workbook or one new worksheet template, but you can add other templates to the backstage or to the gallery in Excel. So I'm going to show you how you can do that. So the first thing is, like here, I'm creating a new workbook, but I just press Control N. But if that's not what I want, then I can put templates onto the File New menu. So here is just the default where you can see the new blank workbook, or you can see templates provided by Microsoft. So if you want to add your own templates in there, you can go into the Excel options, and if you go to the Save part, you can pick a default personal templates location. Now there's a default folder for this, and it's pretty easy to find. So if you go to Windows Explorer and go into your documents, there's typically a folder that was created when you installed Office called Custom Office Templates, and that's a good place, but you can choose any folder you like. I'm just going to choose that one because it's easy. So I'm just going to copy that path from Windows Explorer and then go into my Excel options and paste it in there. And then all you have to do is click OK. And then when you go back to the File menu, you'll see something new. So when you go to File New, all of a sudden there's a Personal tab, and you can see any templates that you had stored in that folder. And if you click those, it'll create a new workbook based on your template. So here's the one that we use at our company. It's our financial modeling template. And now once I've used it, it shows up as something like recent from my Home tab or on my File New tab. But I still have my personal templates there, and I can pick other ones. So that was another one where I just have some sample data that I like to use. Rather than creating it each time, I just click my new template. You can even have a folder within that personal templates folder. And so you really can have as many different templates as you like and keep it organized. The other thing you can do is you can have things that show up in the File New, and you can remove those if you don't want it, or you can even pin them. So here are two of my favorite templates I just like to pin there, and that way you don't have to navigate into that personal folder. They'll also show up on the home, but if you come out, if once you've removed it, if you come back out to an Excel workbook and go back in, it will have cleared it away from the home part. So you can do a similar thing on Mac. However, it's a little bit different because on Mac, if you go into the Excel preferences, you're not going to find a place to specify the user templates or your personal templates. But you're not prevented from doing that. You just need to go into Word and set the preference in Word. So if you go into the Word preferences, like you can see here on the screen, choose File Locations. There's a thing in there called User Templates. And if you specify that, then Excel will see that, and it will also work in Excel. Now, there are a couple differences of how things work between Mac and Excel. On Mac, the personal templates don't appear on the Home tab. You have to go to the File New. The thumbnails might appear a little bit different. And then if you use the book.xltx, then when you choose the blank workbook button, it will use Excel's built-in blank rather than the blank workbook that your template is set up to. Now I'm going to talk about creating a thumbnail. So this is just going in another step. So you can see here on the screen, the My Blank template is just a plain document icon. It doesn't really look like anything special. But then you can see for our company, the SumProduct financial model template we have, I created a nice thumbnail, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So now I'm going to show you how you can create a nice thumbnail. So if we look here, I have some templates, but they just have a typical document thumbnail. And if you look in the personal folder, it's the same kind of thing. You have some that are just a document thumbnail. So let me show how this works. So first I'm going to just open up one of my templates. So I'm going to open up our financial model template that we use at our company. And you can see this is the sheet that's showing here has some information on it. And you can get that to show up in the thumbnail by clicking to Save As. And when you're in there, there's a little trick. If you switch over to the Excel macro enabled template, there's a little Save Thumbnail checkbox. Just check that, and then you can switch back. You don't actually need to save it as a macro enabled file. Switch back to Excel template, and it remembers that you checked that box. And now I just save that file. And if I go back and look now, So I'm on file, and that template all of a sudden has a thumbnail. So it's just simply that save thumbnail checkbox. For some reason, it doesn't show up when you choose the Excel TX file type, but if you choose XLTM, then it will work. So that's just a nice little tip to get the thumbnail. And we're going to show even more about how you can make those thumbnails look a little bit nicer. So now real quickly, I'm going to show how you can make this look a little nicer. If we look at this thumbnail here, you can see it has the row and column headers, which kind of looks a little bit sloppy in my opinion. So an easy way to get rid of that is just go to that sheet, go to the View tab and turn off the headings. That takes away the column headers and row headers, and then just save your template again. So here I'm just going to go in and actually don't need to do a save as. I can just save this one because it is my template. And then if we go back to the file new, you can see those headings are gone. So the column numbers and row number, column letters and row numbers are gone, and it just looks a little bit cleaner. But there's still more you can do to make it even nicer, and I'll show that in a second. Well, I know that went kind of fast, so here's a slide that just describes a little bit to slow down. So again, when you have your file open, you're going to do Save As, choose More Options, and then choose the macro-enabled template file type, and that will make this little Save Thumbnail checkbox show up. So you just want to check that box, and then if your file doesn't actually have a macro, you can switch back to the XLTX or the non-macro enabled template file, save the file, and then the thumbnail will just be automatically created by Excel, and it'll just be like the first few rows and columns of the sheet. And again, if you want to get rid of the column headers and the row numbers, you can just go to the View tab of your ribbon and turn off headings, and it'll get rid of those, and then save your file again. And then you'll have a thumbnail with just whatever appears in the top left corner of your active sheet in the workbook. Now you can also customize the thumbnail even further, and you can do this with some image editing. I just like to use PowerPoint. The key to it is that there's a certain dimension. So the dimensions are going to be 100 width to 77 height. So if you're using like millimeters or centimeters, it's real easy to get that. But you can really use whatever dimensions you like. It's just that that one I found to be one that really works the best. And I'm going to show how to do that in PowerPoint, but basically you can just insert a rectangle and set it to be like say 10 centimeters wide and 7.7 centimeters high, and that's going to give you the right dimensions. And then you can put whatever image you want in there, take a screenshot of it, and then paste that back into PowerPoint and then save it as this file called thumbnail.wmf, and I'll show how to do that now. So here I have my PowerPoint, and I'm just going to go in there and insert a rectangle. So I'll insert a rectangle that's just going to basically have a border, and I'm going to size it to the right size. So here's my rectangle, and I'm going to take away that inner fill because I don't need that. So no fill, and then go up to the height and width part, and here I can change it to 10 centimeters wide, and then I'll put it to 7.7 centimeters high, and that gives us the right dimensions to make this work good. And then I can take whatever image I want, or in this case our logo for my company, and put it in there. And now I have this basic size that I want for the proper size of a thumbnail. And here I'm going to use Windows F on my keyboard, and that puts me in the screenshot mode, and I'm just going to screenshot just within the borders of that rectangle because I know that'll give me the right dimensions. And then I paste it there. So this is my screenshotted image. It kind of looks the same, but it's a little bit different size. Then do Save as Picture, and here you want to choose Windows Meta File. That's the important thing. And then it's called thumbnail.wmf. I have one here, but I'm going to just save it. And then once you have that, the important thing is where you're going to save it or how you're going to actually put it into your template. So to do that, you're going to actually change the extension on your Excel template file by just adding .zip to the end of the file name. And I'm going to show this. And then you're going to take that thumbnail.wmf that you just created, and you're going to go to a certain folder in there and paste it in there. And this is how it works. So I have my model. You can see here it has that the thumbnail that was created by Excel. Again, it's showing me the row and column headers, and I don't want that. So if I go back to Windows Explorer here, you can see the thumbnail.wmf that I created. So I'm going to change my template to the file name, and I'm going to add .zip to the end of it. And now it's a zip file, which is fine, and you're going to change it back, so don't worry. Now copy that thumbnail.wmf, and if you go into the zip file, so here I'm copying it, and then I'm going to just double click to go into the zip file, and there's a doc props folder, and inside there you'll find a thumbnail.wmf. You're just going to paste, and it's going to ask you to replace it, or what, that's what you need to do, is replace it. So now your thumbnail has replaced the one that Excel had created. And just go ahead and change the .zip back to XLTX, and it's all ready to go. And now if you go back into Excel and you go to the file menu and look for a new one, see, you can see this is the thumbnail that I just created. So it's just a nice way that you can kind of make professional looking thumbnails rather than using the ones that Excel creates for you. So that was everything I had to say about templates, but there are lots of more useful options that you can use in Excel to make your life a little bit simpler and easier. And I want to just say that the defaults that Excel gives you are not always the best. So I'm going to go through a bunch of different settings here and show you some things that you might want to consider. So the first one is don't forget auto recovery. So you really don't want to lose information. By default, Excel sets or saves auto recovery information every 10 minutes. I always like to set that back down to just 1 minute. So at the most, you're going to be dealing with losing 1 minute of work that you've done if Excel crashes or whatever. Um, Sometimes that could be a performance issue if you have a really large workbook and it needs to save actually every 1 minute. So you can disable it for specific workbooks, but again, I like to always just go right into anytime I'm on a new computer and change that auto recovery down to just 1 minute. And that way I'm really less likely to lose any work if Excel crashes, which it does from time to time. Another thing you can do is use a monospace font in your formula bar. So you can see here, it's just going to go back and forth a few times. If I turn that on, you'll see the formula bar kind of shows you monospace. It's just a little bit easier if you have really long formulas to kind of see the spacing of it so that it's every character is the same space is basically what it's doing there. So that's just another setting. It's totally a personal preference. I'm not saying that one way is better than the other. It's really up to you. Another really important thing is data conversion options. So I'm probably likely you've seen this where if you type in a number that has some leading zeros, Excel will take those off. If you type in a number that's got a really long number of digits, it might convert it to scientific notation. Or if you type in a number that has an E in the middle of it, that would get converted to scientific notation. If you type something that looks like a date, Excel might convert that to a date. And you can avoid those because some people don't want that. It's not appropriate. So go into your Excel options and go to data, and you have options to turn all of those things off or leave them on. And it's just really nice. And this is something that a lot of folks through the years have complained about. And now you can see I've turned those off, and I'm going to type in the same values and see what happens. So it left my leading zeros on there. Type in a long number, and it's going to leave all the digits just as text. And also typing in a number with an E in the middle, it just leaves that as text. And the same thing for something that looks like a date, it just leaves it as text. So those are really useful options, especially if you're importing data or if you're just dealing with data that meets any of these criteria very often. It's a great option. Some other options I'd like to change are to help me with the top bar of my Excel, and that's the search bar. It that by default takes up a whole lot of space, so you can just go in there and say collapse the Microsoft search box by default, and now you can see there's a lot more space up there. So if you have a long file name, it'll have space. But if you want the search, it's still there. You just click on the search icon and then it opens up. The other thing is to use the QAT. I know a lot of people use this, but there are a lot of great commands and you can add onto there. It's again personal preference. One of the ones I like to use is in the list of all commands. So if you click on all commands, then you can just start typing and it'll bring up whatever you start typing. So the one I like is change table name. So I add change table name and I click OK. And now whenever you're on a table, you can see the table name right up in your QAT, and it just makes it really easy. You don't have to go to the table tab to make the change to the table name, and always good to check your table names as well, because I like to use, names that I put in rather than just table one, table two, table three like Excel does. Another big one, if you're someone that uses pivot tables, is setting up your own pivot table default. So here I'm just adding a pivot table to some data, and this is using all the default settings. So I'll choose a couple fields here. Um, and then you can see, it does give me the default look of the pivot table. And when I choose a date, it automatically grouped that. So you can see the years, but there's, I can expand that out if I wanted to, which may be nice, but a lot of people really don't like the way Excel does it and they want to have more control over that. So I expanded it out, and here I'm going to go into group and I can change it the way I want. So I'm taking off months and just leaving years on there. And that's kind of the way I want it to be. And then maybe I want to go and change it. It's like the default layout is compact form, and I like to use tabular layout, which I know is popular with a lot of people. So I've made that change. And then there's just some styling options you may want to choose, just a different style. And here you can actually just right click on the style that you like, and you can choose to set that as your default. So anytime you create a new pivot table, it will use that default, and you won't have to go in there and switch it every time to the one that you like. So that's an easy one. And then also there's just some other settings. So here, what I'm going to do is go into the options. So there's a way in Excel you can choose default options for all this stuff. Just go to your Excel options, choose data, and then there's a pivot table button where you can choose edit default layout. And you can actually import the settings that you have on a current pivot table. So I had that pivot table I just changed, and I just selected one of the cells and hit import. Now there's some other changes I'd like to do. So I always end up turning off this auto fit column width on update, and I sometimes change what I want to see for empty cells. Sometimes I like a dash, sometimes I like a zero. So I'll add those in and click OK and click OK. You can also disable the automatic date time grouping. So disabling that is a nice option. And now I have the same data on another sheet, and I'm just going to kind of repeat the steps and show just how fast it can be once you've set up your defaults. So insert it on the current sheet, and now I'm going to pick those same fields that I picked before, and you can see already it's using the default style that I wanted. And when I add the date, it just adds the date without grouping it at all. So now I can go in myself, and instead of having to ungroup and regroup, I can just pick that years group that I wanted, and it's done very quickly. So I think setting up your defaults there could save you a considerable amount of time, especially if you're using pivot tables often. Another one is cell styles and outlining. So I think cell styles is really underused, and I'm going to just show here. So this is again our template that we use for our financial models. We actually have a style guide right in here. So we actually show you what all the cell styles in this workbook will look like, and we have a, design purpose for all these different styles. So we have certain things that make your headers look nice and will make it consistent throughout the workbook. We have different styles for cells that have errors in them. We have different styles for different types of data, whether a cell is supposed to be empty, whether it's a calculation for a line or if it's a parameter. These are all have meaning within our template, and we like to keep things consistent. And likewise for number formats, we have a whole bunch of those as well. Ones that have a comma with decimals or no decimals. And it's really easy once you have this set up to go through and just make sure that all your cells in the workbook are styled consistently. And instead of having to select a bunch of cells and go and actually set all the format parameters, you can just pick a cell style and apply it to those, and it's just a lot easier. So highly recommend using cell styles. So the other thing I want to point out here is about using grouping and outlining. So grouping is a pretty easy thing. A lot of people know how to do it. But the one thing that's by default those little buttons show up at the bottom of your group. So you can see here it's at the bottom of a group, and if I click to expand it, the button moves, and it's just kind of annoying. So for me, I like to turn off, and there's an option in there where you can turn off and put summary rows. Instead of saying below detail, it's above, and now the button is at the top of the group. So when you click to expand or collapse it, the button stays in the same place, and it just seems a little bit more natural to me to have those expanding that way. Another thing you can do with cell styles, and this isn't just with going into the gallery and setting up styles, is you can modify 3 particular cell styles that are just up on the ribbon there. So there's the currency symbol, the percent, and the comma style. And these are actually styles that are just built in, but you can modify them. And then if you modify the styles that you can see here, comma, currency, and percent, when you use those buttons on the ribbon, you'll use your modified style. So here's an example of that. I'm going to show what happens when you're using the default ones. So by default, when you have currency and you choose that currency button, it gives you the style, but it has 2 decimals, and I don't usually like that, so I end up turning off the decimals. And then for percent, it doesn't give me decimals, and I actually want decimals, so I add those back in. And then for the comma style, again, it gives me decimals, and I don't really like that, so I end up clicking the decimal button to get rid of those. So now let me just undo those changes, and I'm going to go in and modify these styles, and then you can see that it just happens automatically. So in the comma style, I'm just going to go and remove the decimal places. So click OK there, and then go to the style gallery again and choose currency, modify, and here I'll take away the decimal places as well. And then I'll finally do the percent. So this time I'm going to add the decimal places. So modify, go to the format, and then add 2 decimal places, and then click OK. Now, whenever I use those buttons up on my ribbon, so for currency, I'll click that, and you can see it doesn't give me decimals, which is what I want. When I do percent, it does give me decimals, and when I do the comma, it also doesn't give me decimals. So again, it's just a real easy way that you can control things, and hopefully it's more to your liking. You could even assign completely different styles and then use those, even though the buttons kind of don't indicate what you're getting, but it's just nice that you can control that. If you're someone who uses charts very often, then it's a really good idea to know about chart templates, and this will save you a lot of time. So here I just inserted a basic chart, and I'm going to make some changes. Like I may frequently want to increase the font size of different things, and maybe I don't like the colors or the style. So here I'm just going to change the color, and I'm actually going to get rid of these grid lines and get this to have some data labels. So I'm adding data labels there. And again, I'm going to increase the font size of those. So it's a bunch of changes. And if you're someone who's creating a lot of charts and you're doing these all the time, you can just do it once and then save it as a template, and then you won't have to do it over and over again. So once you get a chart set up the way you like, you can just go ahead and right click on the chart and do save as template. And then again, it's going to go into a special folder. You don't have to really move it anywhere, and you can just give it a file name. So here I'll just call this one my column chart, and then hit save. And now when I create a new chart, so I'm going to just insert another chart. Again, I'm going to get the default at first, but once you have this set up, rather than going through and making all those changes, I can just right click on this chart, and then I can change it to my template. So I'll do change chart type, and then I'll be able to pick my template from the list of, so up on the top of this dialog, there's a templates place, and I can just choose the template and click OK. And now it applied all my changes without me having to go through all those steps that I did before. And likewise, you can just start with a brand new chart. So here, if I do insert chart, I can go down and say more column charts, and it brings that dialog up. So then I can just directly choose my template, and I don't have to actually insert the default chart and then change the chart type. It just creates it directly for me. So again, if you're someone who uses charts, I highly recommend that you check out chart templates. It's a really nice way that you can save yourself a bunch of time. And one final area, and this is one where you can really save yourself a lot of time, is using personal macros. So if you want to create a personal macro workbook, you can just record a macro, and when you get that dialog, you choose to store it in the personal macro workbook, click OK, and then record it and stop. I'm not going to record one now because I already have that set up. And I'm just going to show you like there's many examples of things that can be easier. One thing we always like to do with our template is before we do some work for a client and send it out, we want to make sure that all the sheets are set to the home cell, so everything's at the top left and everything's got the right zoom level. And naturally, as people are working on it, you'll get those things messed up, which is what you can see here. So I'm going to different sheets and there's different zoom levels and scroll positions and things like that. And I just have a macro that will go through every sheet and it can set these for me. So I'm going into my macros, and if I choose personal, then I'll see just the ones in my personal macro workbook. And there's one called Go to Home on all sheets. And I can just run that and it asks me if I want to set it to 100%, and I do. So now it's just in a flash, it went through all of my sheets and it set the zoom level to 100 and it moved to the home cell on every sheet. So everything is scrolled to the top. So it'll look a lot more professional when we give this back to our clients. So again, this is just one simple example. There's so many things you can do with macros, and if you store them in your personal macro workbook, then they'll just always be ready for you to use. And it's just like having extra tools in Excel, um, and it can really save you a ton of time. So that is the last topic for this session. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer those. You can contact me at my email address there, which is steve.kraynak@sumproduct.com. And again, thank you for watching this session. I hope you got something out of it. And again, my company is SumProduct. We are experts in Excel, Power BI, and a bunch of other things. We specialize in financial modeling and we do a lot of Excel training. And here's our contact information if you'd like to. I work with some other great folks on our team, such as Dr. Liam Bastick, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great Excel weekend.